Here's a tricky one to review. Dear Esther released in 2012 from the minds of the Chinese Room and helped bring to the fold what we call walking simulators, a somewhat contentious genre within the gaming community. Mostly in that many argue whether or not it even qualifies as a game. I'm not here to add my voice to that argument. Rather, I'm here to talk about whether Dear Esther, or its re-release for Unity, the Landmark Edition, is worth the price of admission. And that's what's tricky about Dear Esther. Set on an unnamed Scottish isle, Dear Esther tells a story of, well, that's part of the rub. The story here is abstract, told in segments of various letters written by the narrator, voiced brilliantly by Nigel Carrington, which are read to us as we explore the island and randomly told so that each playthrough is very much unique. What we're left with is a tale that is very much up to audience interpretation, with extraordinarily little told directly to us. And that is by design, with the story meant to spark our own imagination, our own interpretation. I'd consider the story in a way more of a poem than a traditional narrative, made for the beauty of its prose and to make the viewer question every line of detail and what it means to them. In turn, the island and music both complement this beautifully. The music is hauntingly beautiful and cues perfectly to our exploration, and the island, while certainly not photorealistic, has a strange sort of beauty to it, offset by the harsh environment and elements of corruption and pollution which contrast this effectively. The island also has its own randomized elements to hint at pieces to the tale. Car parts washed ashore, a large book detailing the history of the island spotted about, photos of an ultrasound, and the ghosts. Yes, look close enough and get lucky enough and you'll notice ghosts following you about your trek through the island. They don't threaten you, as many games imagine them, and their meaning, much like the rest of the story, is for you to decide. What it all means I'd love to leave up to viewer interpretation, but for those curious as to my own, I see Dear Esther as a tale of a dying man writing letters to a lost love tragically killed in a car accident. In his grief, he tries to find meaning or blame in her death, and has trouble coping with the random and senseless nature of it. He seeks solace in the writings of an 18th century explorer, which in turn details the tragic, senseless life and death of a herder named Jacobson, whom the narrator feels some measure of lonely kinship with. The narrator journeys to the island many times, which he walks along whilst trying to cope with and understand his own grief, writing the many letters to his lost love. One day when he explores the island, he falls within a cave and breaks his leg, which quickly becomes infected. Knowing his death is at hand, he makes one final trek across the island before deciding to go out on his own terms, all the while shades of his grief both haunt and guide him. It's a rather bleak tale most ways you twist it, though certainly a beautiful one in its own way. Personally, I find it rather sad that our narrator can never move on from the tragedy, how it haunts him and eventually is the end of him as he clings to memories which often seem to fade in and out with his infection and deteriorating mind. Though others, I know, take a more optimistic viewpoint, of a man so truly in love eventually finding freedom and release, joining that lost love at the very end. But, like I said, it is very much in the view and interpretation of the individual. Hell, I know my own interpretation has shifted over it, and next week I might see it a completely different way. So, is it worth the price of admission? At a few bucks a pop, this isn't exactly an expensive title, which is good because a playthrough shouldn't clock you more than an hour. It is haunting and beautiful and poetic, but it's not for everyone. The game features no action, no interaction, no puzzles to solve or mazes to navigate. It is, as said, a walking simulator. Emphasis on walking. There's no run option here, and you will make your way from one side of the island to the other, one step at a time. The story, too, isn't for everyone. Just like I wouldn't recommend poetry to every book reader, I wouldn't recommend Dear Esther to every narrative lover. If you're in it for the action or want a detailed story complete with fleshed out characters, this isn't the game for you. But if you're looking for a short, beautiful experience more about making you interpret a tale your own way, might be you'll find something to appreciate in Dear Esther.